Hi, everybody. um, I'm gonna share a little more personal stuff again today. I've been trying to think of what I can do to encourage people, and sometimes to encourage people, you have to share the bad things that happen, so other people realize that there is, you know, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow kind of thing. That things do turn out in the end. Years ago, I mean, this was, 22 years ago, I had been out of the organization for about 12 years at that point. The, I had gotten divorced from my first husband and had the opportunity to move. And I wanted to move so bad. I was tired of all the northern cold and winter and all that. And, hey, cut that out. Dumb cat. But, I want to explain what happened for a little bit there. It's hard to know where to start so you get a good picture of what exactly happened when people aren't asking me questions and I'm answering, so I just trying to explain it all is kind of difficult, but I'll try to get it in the right order. My daughter was 12. I'd just gotten married the second time when I moved to the South. I wasn't working. He was working and he made enough money to pay the bills and that, so I was at home taking care of the kids, and there was my 3 kids and his 2 kids that were all, together. And we'd been married for, I don't know, 8 months about, and we lived in this little town of about 200 people. A cute little town, little cabin-like houses, and right on a big fishing, swimming, recreation area. It was beautiful. It was like a constant vacation. I mean, people in the community even set up a shooting range out in the back fields. We'd go up there and target practice shooting. If somebody heard somebody shooting up there, then more people would show up and we'd have a regular competition going. It was a cute little town. We knew the town cops and all the people and everything. The kids could pretty much run around and you didn't really have to worry about them. It was pretty nice. And we had gone fishing at night. We decided, well, we're going to tuck the kids into bed, and it was about 6 blocks down to where we went fishing, so the kids knew where we were going, and so I tucked them all into bed, and my husband and I went down and we were fishing on the little creek at night. Caught some really nice fish too. But we came back early in the morning, and my kids are gone. And there's a note on the kitchen table from the local sheriff's department saying, "We have your children, and if you want them back, come down and see so-and-so at a certain time, and we'll talk about it." I'm like, what in the world? Hadn't done anything illegal, nothing. We were just a couple blocks from the house. And then I noticed my husband doing unusual things, like turning in his fire department radio. Well, he gave it to me, actually. He gave me his wallet. He took everything out of his pockets, and I was thinking, he's done something, and I'm not even going to ask him what he did. I'm going to go down there, I'm going to get my kids back. I don't give a shit what he did, and So we didn't even really talk. We drove down to the sheriff's department, and then they took him one way and they took me the other way, and never saw him again. Well, what actually happened was that when we went out fishing, my daughter called the sheriff's department and told them that she was being molested by my husband. And so they took all my kids. Yep. And at that point, when that happened, when I realized what the sheriff's department was telling me, I was like, tell me, how do I get my kids back? And they said, well, he's going to prison. No way about it. He's admitted to it. He said he did it. He's not denying it or anything. He said he did. So he's going to go to prison, and you cannot have that man in your house. I said, well, he's not in my house. He's going to prison. I want my kids now. And they told me that statistically, that most women choose the man over the kids. And if you keep the man in your life, you can't have your kids. And I'm like, what would possess a woman to choose the man over her children? I don't know, but definitely I'm not a statistic. And don't even treat me like I'm like the rest of the people out here. I said, I want my kids back. Well, my daughter didn't want to come back. She thought I would be so mad at her that I wouldn't want her back. And so I talked to her. I told my daughter, she's 12 years old. I can't believe I'm having this conversation with my daughter at 12. But I told her, I says, listen, guys can be replaced in your life. Your children can't. And you're more important to me than anything. I says, I don't want you to be afraid to come home. And, I'm not going to take it out on you. So she agreed to come back. So they let me pick up all my kids and bring them home. And I hadn't been working, so I had to go. I turned in his fire department radio, pager radio thing, and I when I was there talking to the fire chief of the town, he said he knew where I could get a job, so I started working immediately, but I wasn't making enough money to make it, and they knew that. They were going to help me because they knew us since we lived out there. So he made me cook at a restaurant that he owned, and I wasn't really getting enough hours there, so I worked at another restaurant that was about 16 miles away in another town. So, it filled in all my hours, so I was getting, full-time pay instead of part-time. So I was doing a lot of driving. At the time that my husband went to jail and prison, we had just bought a property in the country. We had located a cheap fixer-upper house that we had to move on to our property. So we paid for that outright and had it due to be moved. And we had to wait for the weather to be right because it rained a lot in there. It's heavy, moving a house. And they had to move it like 100 miles. So they had to wait until things were just right. So I was working those two jobs when the house arrived out at the property. It was just about time that my lease was up at the house we were living in this little town. So I had to go to work. I worked, like I say, the two jobs. When I got off work, I'd go out to the property and work on the house. It needed floors and siding, and it needed electricity and water. it had never had electricity and water out there. It was a parcel of land that somebody was, selling pieces of. And I got 8 acres. The people next to me had 10 acres. So, we weren't, right next to each other. We were spread out a little ways. And I lived at the dead end of this road out in the middle of the country. And it was cheaper for me to make the property payments than it would be for me to pay rent in town. So, considering the situation I was in, I had 30 days by myself to fix this house up and get everything situated enough to where I could move me and the kids in out there instead of keep paying rent in town. And like I say, I worked out there sometimes with just a trouble light hanging from the ceiling so I could get new floors put in there. Fortunately, somehow or another down along my road, I had gained enough knowledge to be able to do things like that, so thank God I knew how to do those things. But as far as the plumbing and the electric, I had to hire an electrician to hook it up because they had to be inspected by the county. I had to hire a plumber to put my septic system in out there. The septic system cost me $2,500. The electrician, it wasn't really that much. But you have to have them leave a little sticker on the pole so that people coming out know that it was inspected and it passed, and all this other stuff. You had to be licensed to do it, so I had to pay for these expensive things. For them to plug the power into my house at the time was $250, and I could have did what he did, but you needed that little sticker, so I was getting this property ready. When the 30 days was up, I had the floors done. I had the siding done. All I had to do was have the water on yet. But because we had to move in the house with no water, I was bringing the kids up to the lake and letting them shower at the free showers up at the lake. I'd stand outside when they were in there taking a shower and that, and then make sure nobody went in there when they were taking a shower in the shower thing. And I was doing my laundry at the laundromat, and I was trying to go to school too. I wanted to earn better money, so I was going to school, had 2 jobs, and had to figure out how to balance all this stuff. And the state that I live in, I don't know if it was bull or not. I don't know. There was no internet. There's any internet then, so I couldn't really look it up to find out. But what they told me was that because we weren't divorced at the time that he went to prison, all of his outstanding bills were my responsibility as his wife. So if I didn't want to go to jail, I had to pay those bills that he left. Otherwise, I would go to jail, and they'd wind up taking my kids. And it would seem like every single thing that happened, it was, well, you have to do this or they're going to take your kids, or you have to do that, they're going to take your kids. It was like I was paying all these consequences for things that I didn't even do. How in the world can they send him to prison where he gets 3 meals a day and free medical and climate control when I'm out here trying to bust my butt, crying while I'm working, doing it all myself, had to pay for the divorce, had to pay for the plumber, had to pay for all that stuff all myself. How in the world? So somebody came up to me one time and says, well, you could probably get food stamps and stuff like that for your kids. And I'm like, really? Yeah, right, sure. So I go down there and I fill out the paperwork for everything, and they tell me, well, you work too many hours. There's no way that we can help you. You work too many hours. And the point was, I wasn't getting to keep that money because I had to I had to pay my ex-husband's bills off, or they were going to throw me in jail. So I had to pay his bills off. It wasn't money I got to keep to help with my kids. That money was already spoken for to keep me out of jail and keep my family together. How in the world can you tell me I don't qualify for help? You know, at one point I told my kids, I said, you know, I'm trying everything I can do. But if they do happen to take you, I'm sorry. You know, I'm doing everything I can. And so finally, finally I got to the end of the deal. I had the water on, I had electricity, I had, you know, everything, right? And we're living in this house in the country. It was nice for a while. You know, kids would go down fishing in the creek, and they could walk to the neighbors to play with some other kids, and everything was okay for a while. Then I wound up with cancer. So my family's shunning me. I haven't talked to my family in 13 years. They wouldn't give me the time of day. Um, I'm the only one supporting my children, and the doctor's telling me that I'm not going to be able to work for at least 4 months. And at the end of 4 months, didn't know what to expect. I was like, well, I moved into town with a friend temporarily because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep doing all that running, you know, to town and everything for cancer treatment and surgeries and all this other stuff. So I moved into town. And while I'm trying to fight cancer, I'm watching my house in the country disappear. They took my land, they took my house. I was too sick to even go out there and move anything out of my house. So everything that was in my house was gone. I couldn't even go and get it. I lost everything. I lost my home. I lost my car. I lost my everything. I didn't even have pots and pans to cook food in. If I wanted to get a house in the city even on my own, I didn't have silverware. I didn't have pots and pans. I didn't have a vehicle to get to work. I didn't have anything. So I called a friend of mine up. I says, you have a place for rent, don't you? And he says, yeah, I had to evict them. They got, you know, they got like 20 more days to get their stuff out of there. So I called my brother up. He lived in Texas, and I called him up. I said, hey, I found this place, and the person that I knew that rented it said that I could pay after I got my job and everything, that I could pay for the rent and all that. That they would wait until I had work. So when I was able to go back to work, I wasn't real strong yet or anything, and so I got a job, and I got a job waiting tables, and so I had my tip money, and I get a check every week. My check every week that I got, every other week that I got, went to pay my rent, and then I could just live off of the tip money, you know, buying the groceries and what the kids needed and all that stuff off my tip money, and my check that I got would pay my rent. It worked out pretty good that way. I was paid ahead of time. After a while, I had all my bills paid up. I had my rent paid a month in advance. So if something did happen, then I'd have a month, you know, slot to find another job and then get a check before rent was due again. I was setting things up that way, you know. But I was also bringing my kids to doctors and my daughters to counseling, and it was just a really heavy, dark time where I lost everything. Not just my home, I lost everything in my home. My clothes, my pots and pans, my silverware, my washer and dryer, my car. I lost everything. And at that point, I didn't know what in the world to do. I prayed a lot. And I knew that if I didn't make it through cancer, if I didn't make it through, that the state would still take my kids, because I had sole custody of my kids, not joint custody. I had sole custody, and I had a family that didn't talk to me. My brother, we didn't talk a whole lot, but he had 3 kids he was raising and having a hard time as it was. I couldn't expect him to take on 3 more kids. So I finally just accepted that my life was in God's hands. There was no use fighting it. And I sat down and I prayed. I says, I have nothing left. I have nothing. So I just asked God to be good to me and help me find a way. After all that, and I found, living in a place, I started working. And I worked and worked again, because, you're not guaranteed time on this planet, so you got to work hard while you're here and get what you got. And so I got a mobile home, put it on a piece of property. I was making payments on the property. It took me 10 years to pay the properties off, but at the end of those 10 years, I wound up with my house and 4 other rental mobile homes on a property, fenced in. Wound up with 4 of those, and in 10 years, I had all the properties paid off, and they were mine. And I couldn't believe it, because I had lost everything. A place I put blood, sweat, and tears in, trying to build for my kids. I lost it just like that. Got cancer, and I watched it all walk away, and there was nothing I could do about it. To living in a neighborhood, owning 5 properties with homes, and all I can do is count my blessings, because I lost one and I gained several more. Learning to be a hard worker, and all I did, I worked so that my kids would have something, so that they wouldn't have to worry about where they lived. They wouldn't have to worry about someone kicking them out or losing everything they owned. I wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. And I'm really thankful that I got through all of that. But it was really, really hard going through it. It was really, really hard. 23 years after I left the organization. 23 years after. This is several years later now. I had my own shop. I was building hot rod cars and restoring custom cars, and originals and all this stuff. I was always doing cars. I had my own shop, my own boss. I was my own boss and had my own shop. I had several cars that I did and sold, and I was just really happy that things turned out the way they did. I was always at home. My shop is in in my backyard. It's a big shop. But just so people know that things can look really bleak. Things can look hopeless. Things can get really dark in your life where you don't know which way to go or what to do next, and you don't know a thing about what you're doing. Just hang in there. If you have your family intact and you have your children, you got a roof over your head, and you got food in your children's bellies, then you have to be thankful for that. Not once going through all the things I went through, not once did I ever lose custody of my children or have them taken away. Everybody that had seen my situation said that there was nothing anybody could say about me neglecting or abusing or endangering my kids. No way. There's just no one could ever say that. I want to make sure my kids had everything I didn't have. If you've heard my story about what happened to me years earlier, you'll understand the importance that I placed on getting counseling from my daughter. I wasn't going to deny her that. I knew from that previous experience on myself, I knew what she would need, and I knew where to bring her and what to provide her. And so I think even in bad situations and things look dark, I think that in the end, when it's all over, said and done, the things that you learn from that process are things that might come in handy later. We don't know what our life is. We can't see the future. But I think in life, things that you go through and things that you have to face prepare you for things that you have to go through later. Things would have gone a lot more terrible for me if I hadn't learned those things early on. And here I am. I got my house is paid for. I don't have to pay on it. I don't have car payments. I don't have house or rent payments. All I gotta do is pay my utilities. So I'm pretty fortunate in that degree. But I just want people to know that, like I say, when things get dark, don't worry. There's things that you might need to be learning. Things that might come in useful later. That later on you're going to say, well, all those things that happened to me before made me able to make it through this next situation. And sometimes when you lose things in your life, there's really not much you can do about it. You got to try your best and do the best you can, but sometimes you just let it go. They're material things. As long as you have your family and your children and you're all safe and sound and fed and you don't have to worry about, so if you're not living on the street like some people do, you're fortunate. Stop and smell the flowers. Enjoy the time you have with your kids. Give your kids the things that you always wanted when you were kids, and see their faces light up with happiness. You know, the things that they remember when they're kids are going to be different than the things you remember. My kids now, I talk to them about that property that we had in the country. They don't even really remember it. And it was no big deal to them. It was big to me. You know, it was hard for me to see that land and all that stuff disappear, but to the kids, it didn't matter. You know, life is an adventure. And you have to look at it as that, as there's always another adventure coming. You know, life is a roller coaster, you know. You live and learn, live and learn, live and learn till it's over, but I don't know. I just wanted y'all to know, be happy. Be happy with what you have. It can be gone in an instant. And then you realize what things really mean. You know, some of that stuff didn't mean anything. I've started over from nothing so many times in my life, it doesn't really matter, although it gets old, you know, but you gotta figure sometimes it just happens. Nothing you can really do about it. Some things are just out of your control, and no matter how hard you work, it all falls apart, but, you know, in the end, it's alright. And the kids, when your kids see you work hard and do everything you can, they grow up knowing that you love them, that you care about them, and they grew up to be hard workers too. And I've had several people, even my son's in-laws, you know, they'd come up to me and they'd say, "You have some really nice kids." And I look at them and yeah, I am real happy. I couldn't be prouder. They turned out to be really good people. And that's all you can ask for, is that the kids that you raise and work so hard for, that they grow up to be good people. And when you hear other people say that your kids are good people, bring them out to pizza. I still buy pizza for my kids. I still help them. I do things for them, but as much as I can, you know. They know that I can't really anymore, but, you know, I just want to share that all with you. Maybe it'll ease some people, you know, that are in a hard time right now, to know that it turns out in the end. Just focus on what you have, appreciate what you have, and just keep on going. My grandmother told me once, she says, all you can do is just put your nose back up, take a deep breath, and keep on going. And that was about the most truthful thing I ever heard. You know, don't hang your head and be ashamed, because those kinds of things happen to lots of good people. So lift up your head, lift up your chin, take a deep breath, keep right on going. Talk to y'all later. Bye.